Right. So in the last session, we discussed about the intro part in context to AML. That time I have discussed and I told you there are different frameworks and libraries we use. Something like TensorFlow, right, PyTorch, right? So different things will be used. Today, I'm going to show you how the installation process is something which we have to do for TensorFlow. Of course, tomorrow I'll be explaining about PyTorch as well. I'm going to explain you about the TensorFlow part because when we are into the development part, especially into artificial intelligence, say ML, machine learning development side, always important for us to understand the basic installation process. Either it can be in any of the operating system, either it can be Linux or Mac, or it can be Windows, right? So any operating system, one must be knowing. Now and then, if you want to use on Linux, there are different commands which we have to use it, different Linux commands to operate, right, that operating system. Or else if it is Windows and all, we don't require that sort. So this is about the TensorFlow installation guide. Okay, whatever I'm explaining you, this is a guide especially useful you guys, but you can download it. So once this is done, you can download it and you can keep it with you because uh, this is important, because if you install it so that it is easy for you to learn and do the practice, whatever the assignments I am giving you, so you can do the assignments, whatever the assignments you required and all, you can do it, because either of your choice, building an application source, using an operating system or Linux or Windows, any one of your choice. But I could see many people are for Windows, right? So that is of your that is your wish, right? So you can do that. But end of the day, installation process is something which you have to understand. Okay, these are all the hardware system requirements you can see over here, because I'll explain you one by one. Because hardware requirements I'll be explaining as separate, system requirements. Next, software requirements, followed by the instructions and all. Of course, you can see this by going to the TensorFlow guide documentation. But when I explained, I hope it feels very easy for you to do it. So on that regard, I'm explaining this to you. Okay, I hope you understood, right? So these are the hardware requirements we need to take when we want to download this. These hardware requirements, make sure you must be having these, especially when you are following Linux. Okay, Linux hardware requirements are these. But if you have taken Windows as a native hardware requirements and all, so these are the hardware requirements for the native part, native Windows application when you want to develop and all, we need to do. But there is something we need to understand as far as the release of TensorFlow is concerned, right? So when it comes to 2.10, right? So when we are using the latest version, so or else it can be 2.11, right? So we need to install the TensorFlow and all. So it's always important wherein to understand about native Windows with GPU, right? So GPU supported on native Windows, this is important, right? So unless until you don't have it, the installation will be difficult. Okay, because compatibility, I'm talking about from the context of the compatibility is difficult. From the Windows point of view, I'm talking about. Next, after hardware requirements, the next one about the system requirements. System requirements, either it can be an Ubuntu can be used, or else it can be Mac OS can be used here, or else it can be, means Mac OS, especially for the people who are using the MacBook and all, right? So for them, it is required. At the same time, if it is Windows and all, you can use even Windows also. That is of your choice, whichever is you feel convenient, so that you can use Windows and all. So these are all the system requirements. Next, software requirements. In context to the software requirements, as I mentioned you, because Python is one of the programming will be used. So Java, which is a common programming language, we are using extensively for a very long time. Tomorrow I'll be explaining about that also, that how the installation will be done on Java. That I'll explain that, because that can be done even, that is different. But end of the day, software requirements, Python is needed. Either it can be 3.9 or 3.12 and all that. Next, you need to have a PIP version of 19.0 or higher for Linux operating system, right? So Linux operating system we are here using. If you are using Windows and all, 20.3, right? So, or higher than that for Macs and as less for Windows and all everything, this can be used. Next, Windows native, when in Microsoft Visual C++, Visual Studio Code is needed. That is what something which I have already taken. This is what in generally the Visual Studio Code is, right? So this is a Visual Studio Code I have taken. So Visual Studio Code, this can be taken, even whatever the Python you want to be installed, everything can be done there, okay? We can do the installation, everything over here. And make sure you need to have this CUDA toolkit, that is important, 1.2.3 CUDA toolkit, followed by this, whatever the SDK 8.97 is also, 9.7 is also important. So these are the software requirements which are needed for us when you are working on the, especially when you are following Windows native I'm talking about. Next, these are the instructions. Of course, you can follow the instructions whenever you are working on in the live class itself. I'll show you how to, because how this can be installed, everything I'll tell you. Because installation of Microsoft VC++ Visual Studio Code means you need to download Visual Studio Code. That is required. So that is what something which I have taken already. This is about the Visual Studio Code is what something I have taken. VS Code you can see. Right. So VS Code is what something I have taken. Yeah, right. So here you can see Visual Studio Code is something I have taken. So even Visual Studio Code can also be downloaded here, right? So you need to install that Visual Studio Code. So that is even important. Next, you need to install this Miniconda, right? So this is majorly recommendable when you are installing any kind of TensorFlow, if which requires any kind of GPU support, all that. This Miniconda is something required, because if you want to create any separate environment, right? So if you want to uh, see, like, because different softwares are we installing in our systems and all, you want to create any separate environment. So in order to avoid any kind of changes, normally this one is being used, right? So this is majorly for Windows installer. This can be used, right? So this can be used. Next, CYND Conda environment, we can use it. This environment we can use wherein if you want to make it for Python, because Python or PyTorch, right? So these are the things which normally we use for the programming part. Of course, we have even Java legacy also, but whatever I'm explaining you from the Python perspective, right? So that also can be used. Next, we require some GPU setup. GPU setup is needed, right? So if you want to install GPU setup and all, whatever the different GPU drivers we have, and how this can be installed, how the GPU drivers can be installed. So that I'll explain, because this drivers installation is a separately I will explain to you, right? So this GPU, how to create this GPU setup and how to install these GPU drivers. If you don't have in the system, if you have in the system, then it's fine. Otherwise, we have to download it. So that also can be done. So these are the major ones we need to be downloaded before you are getting into the TensorFlow part. So once it is done, then TensorFlow requires. So TensorFlow is something which we have to be install it. So once the TensorFlow is installed and all, we can verify it. Once the verification is done, so TensorFlow will be installed successfully. From there onwards, whatever the ML projects, right? So machine learning project development, whenever we do, by using Python language, we can work upon. Okay, so that time generally this TensorFlow successfully will be installed so that we can use it. This is how generally the TensorFlow installation instruction guide is. Tomorrow I will show you anyway how one by one we have to install everything, and you have to show you. Tomorrow I'll show you that. Next, these are the package locations. Of course, these package locations you can go through. This is not something important for me to explain at this level, but in tomorrow, when I'm explaining about this, they'll explain you how the installation process, because this installation process is needed, important. So once you know the installation process about this, then it is easy for you to work on the ML projects, machine learning projects from the development side, right? So this is all for today, right? So tomorrow we discuss the extension. From there, even Visual Studio Code installation of Java can also be seen later. Okay, then see you. Bye.